I'm Edward Warfield. I'm the publisher of CityBiz. I'm honored today to interview Steve Van Til, who is the CEO of Brivo. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Can you provide a snapshot of Brivo, employees, key products? Give us a quick overview of Brivo.
Sure. So today we're about 250 people strong. The single largest office we have is in Bethesda, Maryland. Our secondary offices are in Provo, Utah, and Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Our primary product is and really always has been cloud-based access control. And then we have a number of different adjacent products that work with that. So Brivo Smart Apartment, Brivo Visitor, Brivo Mobile Pass, things like that.
You've been CEO of Brivo since 1999. Can you provide some of the key milestones over the last 2 decades?
Well, sure. So the first one, obviously, was getting the company started back during the dot-com era. And originally, we'd started out with a logistics solution for package delivery, but we were about 20 years ahead of our time. There are still people trying to get that business going. So about 2 years in, we pivoted the business to reuse a lot of the core technology that provides remote control of IoT devices and permissions for users to get in and out of them. We pivoted the company away from the original logistics concept and turned it toward commercial access control. And the premise there was we'd been focused on providing a technology that could control small boxes, and buildings are really just big boxes. And so that turns out to have been one of the best decisions we made, certainly in the early part of the company. And it's what carried us through to this day. So that certainly is a big one. I would say another big one, just jumping many, many years forward, would be the introduction of a product I mentioned earlier, Brivo Mobile Pass. And the reason I cite that is because it's the first mobile application that allowed users to unlock doors both in person and remotely on a cloud-based access control system. And that's perhaps a well-known bit of functionality today. You can find it in a lot of smart home systems, for example. But at the time we introduced it, it was brand new in commercial. And in addition to being a cool feature and a really helpful feature, it really changed the relationship between access control systems or security systems in general and the populations that they serve. And what I mean by that is originally the products would have a relationship with the system administrator who would log in and perhaps change things, add users, delete users, look at logs and that sort of thing. But all of the people who were coming and going from buildings just had a piece of plastic. They had a plastic access control card. And so they effectively had no relationship with the product. They had no relationship with the cloud system, and they had no real-time relationship with the people who were supervising the comings and goings from their building. And so this really brought the user experience for the first time into the product. And so I think that that was a huge turning point, because now the industry has shifted, and all of us are thinking much more about the different stakeholders that are involved in interacting with buildings and with these kinds of products, not just the administrators or the property managers. So I think that's really significant because it enlarged the audience and it changed the nature of the solutions that we're providing.
So you were prop tech before the word prop tech was bandied around.
So yeah, we've got claim to 3 of those titles now. So we were prop tech before the word prop tech was invented. We were cloud before the word cloud was invented, and we were IoT before those 3 letters were sandwiched together to refer to devices that connect to the internet. So we were ahead of all of those before the monikers were ever invented.
So in 2015, Brivo was acquired by Dean Draco, who's the founder of Barracuda Networks and the current CEO of Eagle Eye Networks. Can you tell us about Dean and his interest in the company?
Sure. I'll use some of the story that I've heard Dean tell many times, which is that he was looking at Brivo as a company that was doing very similar things to what Barracuda was doing, albeit in a different market. And what he meant by that is that we were the first and largest cloud-based access control company. And just as he had seen the entire computing world go from on-premise servers to cloud in the general IT space, he could see that the same transformation was going to take place inside of the security space or the smart building space. And so it made sense for him to buy Brivo at that time. He had already started a few years earlier another company called Eagle Eye, which is a cloud video provider. So the two paired up very well. We've got a deep relationship between the two companies. And I think that's really the essence of the story.
So you were a photography major at Mike of the Maryland Institute of Art. Can you tell us about your career, the decision to join Brivo?
Sure. So my actual day jobs had always been in technology, specifically software, spanning the communication satellite industry. And then I was in healthcare informatics for a while. And then immediately before Brivo, I was working for a large software development company based out of the Boston area. And we were doing a lot of the early internet systems for companies that range from Fortune 500 companies that were trying to figure out how to leverage this new internet thing, or startups who had gotten large sums of money from the whole .com investment era and needed people with technical wherewithal to help them build systems with that money. And so I was doing that. I think I ran through about 5 or so different client engagements in a 2-year period leading up to 1999. And I really felt that because this was such a golden period for the formation of internet companies, if I didn't do it at that time, I would kick myself for a long time to come. And so I quit my day job, started Brivo with 3 other guys, and the rest of that is history. The photography piece, that was always a side gig. It was always a personal passion. And so that never really became part of a career track for me, but it's something that I still enjoy very much to this day.
And so what are the major products of Brivo?
So the products really come in 2 different forms. One is, of course, the cloud product. And so there, the core product is called Brivo Access. It is a complete environment for any commercial business, from the smallest, strip mall owner to the largest corporation or hospital or warehouse, to provide comprehensive access control services, visitor management services, and things like that for their entire property portfolio, whether that's 1 building or 500 buildings. That part, the cloud part, is what we're best known for, and that's really what defines the business model. It's a SaaS business model. The other part of the product is a series of hardware devices that connect the buildings that we protect to the cloud. So they're called things like control panels or readers that are installed in the property that connect to the internet and then can talk to the cloud or talk to the mobile apps that we have.
And you recently launched a Brivo Snapshot, which is a facial and person detection tool. Can you describe the key features of Brivo Snapshot?
Sure. I'll start by talking about the motivation for it. Having worked in this area for a long time, I knew that one of the pain points for customers was that when you're using an access control system and you want to consult some video in order to verify what was going on around an access control event, then it was very often a laborious process of linking through, downloading the video or just a video clip, then watching that for 20, 30, 40 seconds until you got to the part that you were interested in. And that's fine if you're doing it once or twice a day. But if you're doing it hundreds of times per day, this becomes a major time suck for you in your role as a system administrator or a property manager. So what we thought about was, how can we reduce the time burden that doing this work takes? And the key observation was, there's usually just 1 frame out of a minute's worth or 2 minutes worth of video that the person is really interested in seeing. And so if we could find that frame for them, we could pull that out, put it into a scrolling display window, and save them all the trouble of doing the download, the watching, and everything else. And so machine learning and the algorithms for facial detection were a key part of the technology for finding that frame. And so the way it works is it scans all the frames in a video that is associated with a door, so a camera that's above or alongside or near a door. It continuously scans through there, and it's rating each frame on how how good of a score it gets for facial detection. So when an access control event happens, we find the frame closest to that has the highest facial detection score in plus or minus 20 or 30 seconds. We pull that frame out and present that to the user. So it's an interesting way of providing a real benefit, which is saving people time with machine learning technology that's pretty widely available these days, and then being able to create something new and value added out of that, which is this permanent record of all of the facial images that have been captured while people come through a facility, and then indexing those back into the underlying video source.
So in March of last year, Brivo acquired Parakeet IoT. Can you tell us about the acquisition and its impact on Brivo?
Sure. Parakeet Technologies was a smart apartment company that we were interested in because we'd been in the multifamily space in what's called the base building. So if you think of access control for lobby doors, for swimming pools, for gymnasiums, community centers, all those things that are typically at the ground level of an apartment building or an apartment complex. Those are places that we'd always been, and those kinds of customers had been using Brivo for many years. More recently, as smart home technology became more attractive, more affordable, more reliable, people who ran apartment buildings and apartment communities started thinking there's probably some good arguments for putting this technology inside of apartments, both from a tenant satisfaction point of view as well as an operational savings point of view. So Parakeet Technologies provided that part of the solution that we didn't have already inside of our own core product suite. So we bought them, merged their applications and their technology stack onto ours. Now we have a complete solution for multifamily, whether it's a high-rise building or a collection of garden apartments, and it gives them a common key, a common mobile key for all of the doors in the community as well as the individual apartment doors. And then above and beyond that, the Parakeet technology brought in some of the familiar smart home features like thermostat control, lighting control, sensors, and things like that.
And so what are the technological forces disrupting your world of security?
Certainly, historically, over the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years, cloud has been a big one. We've been leading the industry in terms of cloud adoption and making that a force with our customers and in the industry at large. Mobile is one of the second ones I'd mentioned earlier with respect to Brivo Mobile Pass, that it changed the way you can open doors. That's the part that everybody noticed, but it also changed the relationship with the stakeholders. And I think in terms of long-term impact, that change in the relationship with stakeholders where everybody who is party to a piece of real estate or a piece of residential dwellings now has a relationship with each other through these apps that they wouldn't have had before. So that's been a very big one. Going forward, I think that artificial intelligence and machine learning are going to be a very big force in a couple of different ways. One, they will continue to reduce the amount of time that people have to spend on managing these systems and watching out for security events, because the algorithms that can be used, much like the one that we use to detect faces, can also be used for things like anomaly detection, which is something we're introducing this quarter. That's going to reduce the burden of managing these systems, and it's going to improve the quality of detecting anomalous events and letting people know. One of the things I like to remark on for what I would consider the best goal for any security system would be that it tells you everything you need to know and nothing more. And the reason I say that is that historically these systems have been very noisy and very chatty, providing lots of information, which is great, but in a sense, providing as much noise as signal. And so what these algorithms do is they sort the signal from the noise. They tell you just what you need to know, just what you need to pay attention to. And that's ultimately what we want any of our technology to do.
So this year you came up with the Brivo Smart Security Trends Report. What were some of the key findings in that?
So there are a couple of things. One, COVID really changed everybody's priorities, and it's been, I would say, an inadvertent boon for certainly the commercial access control market, because what people realized first early on in the pandemic was that they needed to have remote control of their buildings, and that the cloud gave them that, along with the mobile apps that allowed them to communicate with their users, issue credentials, things like that. The second thing is that integrations between systems, particularly now that a lot of the applications for adjacent parts of the businesses that we're in, like property management or co-working or flex space management, all of these are in the cloud now. And so cloud to cloud integrations between access control, which is a foundational technology for any space, and all of these add-ons for very specific functions, these are much more prevalent now because they're easier. They're done in the cloud. You do them once, and it's a benefit that your entire customer base can enjoy. So people are very focused on integrations between systems, and that's a big part of what people are shopping for when they look at Brivo. The last thing is that data has really come to the fore. And I hinted earlier at some of that with my remarks on anomaly detection. But this is really a case where having large volumes of data on user behavior for each building, for each person, for each part of the building allows you to use big data to help improve that signal to noise ratio for any building. The way that works is that over a period of time, you can have machine learning algorithms that figure out what's normal for your building or for your staff or for a particular part of your real estate portfolio. And then in the future, once it's trained up, it can tell you when something abnormal happens. And that is purely a byproduct of data collection and data analysis. And so that's one example of why data or data-driven security is becoming one of the big influencers going forward.
And you recently wrote an article about the future of security being AI and robots. So what role are robots and AI going to play?
So we talked about AI already. I think the place where robots are going to come in, and this is a very broad definition of what a robot is if you think about some of the biggest problems that people have in both multifamily real estate as well as commercial, it's the pileup of packages that are being delivered from not just Amazon and the familiar e-commerce originators, but really from everywhere, because more and more commerce is moving online. Less of it's being done with the person who's buying things actually bringing it home or bringing it back to their building. And so this package delivery problem, which is actually where Brivo got started, is only getting worse for people who are managing buildings. It's a clutter and it's an efficiency thing. So I think when you consider what's going on with AI, specifically computer vision, when you think about what's going on with self-driving cars, which I would call a form of robots, and you put those things together, some of the automated delivery that's just getting started now in the form of drones and some of the carts that are going down the sidewalks in larger cities. If you put all those things together and look at the convergence point with building technology, what it says is that you can get a car or a car plus some sort of delivery robot all the way up to the door of a building, but you still have to let them inside. And so for this vision of automated delivery to really take hold, you still have that issue of presenting credentials, opening the door, and letting the robot come inside with a package and leave it behind and go on its merry way. So I think that when you look at how AI and robots converge with the security industry, that's one of the primary use cases. There's some other things that people are using robots for right now. They're using them to substitute for human guards. So they're driving around. They've got, half a dozen cameras attached to them, some other sensors. They can talk. They can move. That's another example of using what people would more traditionally think of as a robot inside the security domain.
So what are the growth plans for Brivo? And are there any interesting prop tech companies out there on the horizon that would be interesting?
So our growth plans we kind of sort that out between some vertical market segments. So enterprise and commercial real estate would be two examples there, alongside of multifamily that we talked about before. And so we're dedicating lots of sales and marketing resources to growing the company inside those verticals. The other thing we're doing is expanding geographically. So in 2022, we're going to see a big increase in the number of people that we have in Europe and in Latin America. And if you look a few more years beyond that, we'll be in a few more markets. Can't say exactly which ones. Really depends on which markets we think look the best at that point.
And so is there any part of the Brivo story that you haven't shared with us that you'd like to drill a little deeper into?
Well, I could, but you know how that sentence ends, right? I think, in 20 minutes or whatever it's been, we can't really tell the whole story. The things that I think connect with some of the other parts of the story I've told already, extracting more value out of video. One of my themes is that if you look at all of the video surveillance systems and the kind of user interface that they have, they're optimized for what an owner of one of those systems wants to do. And they've got lots of work that they need to do, from real-time surveying of what's going on in a building to different kinds of forensics. But if you look at the way people use video in the context of an access control system, and what they're interested in finding out, if they're primarily interested in access management or the flow of people, they have different questions and use cases than what you find in the video surveillance part of the industry. And so being able to extract the kind of value that access control users want from video is an ongoing theme that we'll do much more with in the future. The snapshot was just one example of adding value to that video stream and answering questions for the access control user. We'll do a lot more of that. The other thing would be just an extension of the data theme that we talked about before. This past fall in November, we launched the fourth generation of our technology. And if you do the math, that says we kind of reinvent our platform every 5 years or so, given our 20-year history. The user interface is new, it's beautiful, it's got a lot more features than it ever had before. That's the first thing that people notice. But one of the big drivers for this most recent generation of the technology was to put a data infrastructure in place that allowed us to do analytics, big data, machine learning, and to be able to disseminate that information to people in more ways than we had before. And so the data infrastructure is the proverbial part of the iceberg you can't see. That's a big part of what we're doing going forward.
Well, Steve, I enjoyed hearing your personal story and the story of Brivo, and we wish you the best of luck going forward, and keep us abreast as you conquer new territories, buildings, and countries.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure to speak with you today.
Thanks, Steve.